Welcome to the Genealogy Professional Podcast, the resource for transitional and experienced genealogists who want to create a successful business. I'm your host, Miriam Pierre-Louis. Here you'll learn from professionals all around the world who work in the field of genealogy. Are you ready to get started? Then let's get going. Welcome to the Genealogy Professional Podcast. Today, we're going to start shaking things up a bit. Instead of doing an interview with a genealogy professional about their business, we're going to instead focus on resources that professionals can use in their work. We begin by talking to Kerry Scott about her new book, How to Use Evernote for Genealogy. Kerry, welcome to the Genealogy Professional Podcast.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Why don't we get started by having you tell us just a little bit about yourself, and then we'll dive straight into Evernote.
Okay. Well, I've been a genealogist since I was about 21. I kind of fell into it by accident. I moved to Wisconsin, where I had never even been, and I got a letter from an elderly relative who said, "Oh, your roots are in Wisconsin. Your third great-grandparents are buried up the road a little ways." And then she died, so I never got to follow up with her. So in digging for those people that she mentioned, I fell into this whole world of genealogy, and I've been at it ever since. So I have more than 20 years of experience now. I was in corporate human resources for about 14 years, and I finally retired from that in 2008. I had 2 little kids, and I decided to stay home with them and focus on writing in genealogy, and I've been doing that ever since.
Let's start with what is Evernote exactly, and how did you get hooked on it?
By accident, like most things in genealogy, I got hooked on it by accident. Evernote is a tool that helps you capture, find, and use the information that you gather. And that can be in genealogy. It can be other hobbies like knitting. It can be your real life, like your grocery list or your household owner's manuals, things like that. I keep everything in Evernote because I am getting older and I can't always remember where I put stuff. I no longer need to think about where I put information because it's always in Evernote. The answer is always check Evernote, and lo and behold, I find it. I fell into it by accident, as I said, because I tried it when it first came out. I kind of like to try new technology things. I like shiny, bright objects. And I hated it. I thought it was the dumbest thing I'd ever seen. I opened it up and it kind of looked like a word processing document. And I thought, well, this is stupid. I could take notes in Word if I wanted to do that, or I could stick to my usual method, which was a piece of paper, often in my case, scrap paper, which has a whole host of negatives to it. So I closed Evernote and I didn't touch it again for about a year. When I had a project where I was working with a non-genealogy client, I had to reuse it because she was really into Evernote and you have to kind of do what the client wants. So I opened it up again, and as I got to see how she was using it, I realized that this could actually be a really great tool. And I started using it a little more. I used it just for genealogy for a long time. But when I really got into it was when I started using it for other things as well. The great thing about it is it goes across platforms. So you can have it on your desktop computer, on your laptop, on your phone, on your tablet, on a Chromebook. You can have it all over the place. So you always have it with you, and it's always synced. So you don't have to think about transferring documents or transferring information. And the power of that is tremendous because you always have access to the information you need. The other thing about it is you can use different formats of things. So you can have typed notes, you can have audio recordings, you can have photos, you can take photos of documents. There are all sorts of things that you can put in Evernote in one big mishmash. They don't have to be separated out. So you can put like things with other like things regardless of the format. So it's more like real life in that maybe I have a picture of my coffee maker that I want to buy, and I have pictures of the tags at Target and Walmart and all these places to price shop for the coffee maker that I want. And then I have a screenshot from Amazon to see if it's cheaper there. And then when I buy the coffee maker, the owner's manual is in a PDF, so I store that in there. And then I have the different places that you get the K-cups for the fancy coffee maker. All of these disparate bits of information can be in the same coffee maker file in Evernote. So I have everything I need in one place. It works for coffee makers, but it works for dead people too.
So it seems like Evernote can be used by a lot of different types of people. Why do you think genealogists should use it?
I think for genealogy, it's especially handy because we get our information in so many different ways. I think this made it into the book. I have one of the biggest clues that I ever had in genealogy came from an engraving on a spoon. If I hadn't had a picture of that spoon in my Evernote file, I probably wouldn't have made the connection. And this is the other part. Our clues can come decades apart. I got that spoon in the early 90s, but newspapers weren't online until 15, 20 years after the spoon, so I couldn't look up the date that was engraved on the spoon, and I wouldn't have necessarily remembered that in between those 2 decades. I had a lot going on during those 2 decades. So it helps us track disparate clues, things that don't seem to go together. So when I went into Evernote and searched on that date, I found a newspaper article that I had clipped that seemed promising, but I also found the engraving on the spoon because Evernote indexes everything, including stuff that is on like say you take a picture of the back of your grandma's china, the name of the china company is imprinted. Maybe it says Mikasa. You can search on that and Evernote will index that. It has this OCR technology that allows you to find that. So when I did a search for that date, it came up with the spoon, and I realized that this newspaper article I had was connected to this date, and that it was in fact about my family, and it led me to a bunch of other discoveries. So I think the fact that it allows us to have a lot of different types of media, which is what we work with, and it allows us to find clues that we get so far apart that our normal human brains couldn't necessarily make the connection. Evernote can make that connection for us. It also has a huge amount of storage space. We get a lot of stuff, and Evernote can handle, if you're a premium member, you can have 10 gigabytes per month, and your total file is unlimited, at least at this time. So you can put a lot of stuff in there and let Evernote index it for you so that you can find everything again without having to remember where you put it or what goes with what. I think that's really powerful. I think, too, the fact that you can find things so easily means even if you're a really disorganized person or you can't figure out how to file things so you can find them, it doesn't matter because that search feature is so powerful. It's going to help you find what you need.
Now, I seem to recall that you're a very organized person. I was looking for some proof of that, but I couldn't find it. I recall that when you moved from Wisconsin to New Mexico, you had everything absolutely organized and labeled. Is that true?
That is true.
Yeah.
I am so organized that people make fun of me. In fact, when the movers came to give us an estimate when we still lived in Wisconsin for our move to New Mexico, the moving person asked me if I was a preschool teacher because I had all these bins with a label maker and alphabetized, and yeah, I have a little bit of a problem. So disorganization is not my problem, but sometimes that can be a handicap because you can be paralyzed by how to file things. When you get a new ancestor, you don't necessarily know the surname or the maiden name or the location or whatever your chosen criteria is for how to file them. And if you're a hyper compulsively organized person, that can be really frustrating. So Evernote isn't just for the chaotic types, it's also for the people who can't function until they've figured out the exact perfect organizational structure. And unfortunately, I'm one of those.
Well, I find it really funny because I'm just pretty much the opposite of you. I'm a fairly disorganized person, and my motto in life is if you can't put it in the computer and keep track of it there, it's probably not worth keeping track of.
Right.
So
Evernote is perfect for both of us because whatever our compulsion is, whatever you put in Evernote, you're going to find it again. Even if you put everything all in one big notebook, you'd find it again. It's beautiful that way.
Yeah, I scan everything these days and get it in my computer. I have a no paper policy just because only because I can't keep track of paper.
Right.
That's my problem. So what makes Evernote different from other apps? I feel like I'm bombarded all the time with people suggesting, oh, use this app, use that app. This will keep you organized. I sometimes feel overwhelmed. How does Evernote, differentiate itself from this whole myriad of options out there?
I think part of it is because it's not just for genealogy or just for running your household or just for your to-do list. Because it's so simple, it's very flexible and you can run your whole life from it. I don't like things that only do one thing. I got a quesadilla maker as a gift recently, and I was like, but it only makes quesadillas. I need tools that can make 7 different things, or else forget it, because I only have so much room in my life and in my cupboard for tools, and that's true for my computer as well. But I think because Evernote can do everything, can handle all of your organization needs, not just your genealogy needs, that's a big plus. I also think because it is platform agnostic, it doesn't matter if you're on a Windows or a Mac, or if you're working with somebody. My husband is all Windows, he's very corporate, and I'm on a Mac now, so I'm like a hippie, so we don't always work together technologically very well, but Evernote doesn't care. It works on both of our platforms, and it works on our tablets, and it works on the stuff that my husband has to use for work. It works on everything, so you're not limited or boxed in. And I find that a lot of apps out there do 1 or 2 things really well, but that's not necessarily, then you have 67 apps that all do 1 or 2 things really well. I'd rather just have 1 or 2 and put everything in there. So I think for me, that's been the thing. And I didn't really get the full power of Evernote until I started using it for everything. When I used it for genealogy, it was very nice. But when I also used it for keeping track of my tax stuff and my grocery list and my owner's manuals and the kids, all that paper you get from the school, all of that automatically goes into Evernote now. So I always have access to it. So I think when you start using it to run your whole life is when you really become more proficient and also find how powerful it really is and how many other apps you don't need anymore. Like I used to have a grocery store app and a separate recipe app and a password app, all these different things. A lot of that is now gone because I just use Evernote.
You had mentioned the example of the spoon earlier. Can you give us another example of how you've used Evernote in your research?
Oh gosh, I think that the thing I use most is the instant indexing. I use it, for example, to every death certificate or marriage record or anything that comes in the mail, I immediately either take a picture with my phone if I'm not at my desk, or run it through my scanner and get it into Evernote, because then it doesn't matter if I misplace it. My kid colors on it. I once had a really expensive pension file that my then 2-year-old colored all over, $80 pension file. It doesn't matter anymore because it's all preserved in Evernote and I can find it again. The words I just got a death certificate on Saturday. I scanned it in and then immediately laid it down somewhere and still haven't found it. But I was able to find it on Sunday when I was working because I typed in the last name of the person and it's indexed on there. It was a typewritten death certificate, and Evernote can scan that photo of a document and capture every single word on there. So the instant indexing in general, the spoon is just one example, but I use that constantly. I also actually have a PDF copy of the Evernote book in Evernote because I often am now getting emails from readers about certain questions or something on page 93 or whatever. And the easiest way for me to pull it up and see what they're talking about is to search for it on Evernote. I can search every word in the book and every word in every image in the book, and it's faster than actually picking up the book and turning to the right page. So I use the instant indexing feature for absolutely everything.
How do you think Evernote can help genealogy professionals work smarter? I hear you talking about the indexing and the OCR. Overall, how is this tool going to help them work smarter and help them save time?
Well, I think one example is sharing. It has the ability to share a note or a notebook with a client or with a cousin with whom you're collaborating or with a colleague, and that helps you kind of follow along and see what's going on. I have a guy who I'm working with who is not a professional genealogist, but he's fairly proficient, and I was working this weekend on our shared line, and I have a shared notebook with him, so he's actually traveling, but he can see what progress I'm making and even answer questions right in there. It's almost like a live chat. We don't even have to have email dinging back and forth, because as I'm working, I found a really cool death certificate. Missouri has the online death certificates, and I uploaded it, and within minutes, he typed in, "Oh, wow, this is so cool." And he was sharing it with his elderly mother-in-law, who is my relative. So it's the sharing capability makes communicating with clients or colleagues much easier. I think that also has applications for a lot of the volunteer work that we do. Genealogy is run on volunteers, and most of us are involved in some capacity with a society or organization. Those things can be a lot like herding cats. It's difficult to get volunteers to work together, and there are always hiccups. But being able to easily and seamlessly share and collaborate and work together without a lot of tech savvy or without physically getting together in the same place is really helpful as well. I also think there are things like, for example, taxes. This year is the first year I'm going completely paperless with taxes. I'm not saving a single receipt. So when I had to go to Best Buy last Friday and buy a headset. I immediately, right there in the Best Buy, took a picture with the Evernote camera app of the receipt for the Best Buy headset, because that's going to be tax deductible. I use it for my business, and it goes right into my taxes file. So when I go to file my taxes at the end of the year, I'll be ready to go, and I won't have to wonder what I did with the receipt. That keeps my file cabinet empty, and it also keeps me from losing things. I'm actually pretty organized at home, but once I get out of my house and on the road, it's sometimes a different story. I've had lots of trips to Salt Lake City where I know I ate at the Blue Lemon 67 times, but I don't have 67 receipts. Now I can capture those in Evernote and make sure I have all of the tax information that I need to be able to do my bookkeeping. So there are lots of things like that that I think can help us spend less time on administrative tasks and more time doing research.
You had mentioned about the person you're collaborating with getting the Missouri death certificate. So does that mean that the person is getting a little notification in Evernote when you're collaborating, when you're working on a shared document? Is that what's happening?
Yeah, he's getting a notification, and he knew I was working on it, so he was kind of hitting refresh and checking that file. I think he was stuck in an airport. So he knew I was working on that, and at times that you're working together, you can be watching that. My husband and I did that actually when we were moving from Milwaukee to Albuquerque. I came out to Albuquerque to look at houses, and we had a list of the houses we were looking at, and he knew the addresses in the rough order in which we were going to look at them. And so I went around with the realtor and typed in notes and occasionally took photos and stuff with Evernote, and they auto updated. And so he and the kids back in Milwaukee could follow along with the house tour as it was going on. It was really cool.
Can you get these notifications? I'm harping on this a bit, but this is like one of my little idiosyncrasies. Can you get push notifications like to your smartphone? So that
I believe that you can. It's going to depend a little bit on whether you're on Android or iOS and what operating system. I don't have that because I don't like a lot of mobile notifications, but I believe that you can set it up to do that.
And is there any limit to how many people you can collaborate with on a given document, or is it a folder? I mean, what's the compartment that you're sharing?
You're either sharing a note or a notebook, and the amount of stuff that the other person can do depends on your subscription level. So, for example, if you're a cheaper subscription, person. They can read the note, but they can't edit. I have a premium subscription, so they can actually edit, and we can go into the note history. If they, let's say I find, oh my goodness, there's a non-paternity event here, and suddenly things start getting deleted, which is an actual thing that I've had happen, you can go into the note history and see what went wrong. So the degree to which you can do cool things while you're sharing depends on your subscription level. If there's a limit to how many people, I haven't hit it. I tend to only share with 1 or 2 people at a time just because otherwise it gets a little chaotic. If there's a limit, I'm not aware of it. I don't think there is. And I know there are people who are doing society work who have groups. Like, say you're working on the bylaws, you're probably going to have quite a few people involved in that. And I haven't heard of anybody hitting a limit.
In your book, you mentioned that Evernote can be used to help build good research habits. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, we always know, even as a baby genealogist, we're told that we should have a research log. We should keep track of where we go so that we don't go over the same ground again. And yet, I have done this, and I don't know anybody else who hasn't. Maybe late at night, you can't sleep, and you're on Ancestry, and you're going, and you flip over to Family Search, and then, oh, look at this Find a Grave, and you're all over the internet doing ridiculous things, and you're not keeping track of any of that. If you have Evernote, you can still do goofy stuff like that, and every so often, that's kind of fun. Sometimes you're on a roll, and you're really just, grabbing the low-hanging fruit. But with Evernote, because it has this web clipper where you can capture what's on your screen, it also keeps track of the URL for that. So, for example, if I'm looking, as I was looking at that Missouri death certificate online this weekend, when I screen captured the death certificate, it also captured the URL. So when I went to add that to this guy's ancestry tree, I had the URL to use for the source citation, and I also was able to provide that to him so that he can see for himself. He wasn't aware of the Missouri death records being online, and this family has quite a bit of history in Missouri, so that's a new resource for him. So not only being able to say, this is where I got this document, but it's also helpful to be able to say, and you can probably find more documents on your other lines that are going to be of value to you on this same website. So it helps you keep track of where you've been and where you've gotten stuff, and you don't have to do that manually anymore. I also find that because it's there and it's so easy to use, you're more likely to actually use your research log. When I started using a research log, it was the mid-90s, and I created a form in Word and then took it to the Kinko's and had them print it. And then I wrote on the form in pink ink because it was the 90s and I was, I guess, an idiot. And so I have all of these old forms written in pink ink that is now completely illegible because I didn't know I was going to get older, that it was going to fade. And I also didn't know where to file a lot of them because maybe you start with the Nelson line, but then you find these Jorgensens and these Sorensens, and you can tell from the surnames I'm Scandinavian, so they also have farm names, not just patronyms, and then they changed them back and forth. So who knows where you're going to file that paper copy? Those research logs ended up being largely useless to me. And so as a baby genealogist, I stopped using them for a while because, as I said, I'm really organized and I couldn't figure out how to file them, so it kind of paralyzed me. Now I don't worry about that. I can have one big research log if I want to, and I'll be able to find the Sorensen, the Jorgensen, the Nelson, the Olsen, because it has a search feature, and I'll be able to find the farm name. I'll be able to find all of the information I need because it's so easily searchable. So I think it removes some of the barriers to doing the things that we know we should do, like research logs anyway. It's kind of like you know you should exercise, but if you have a treadmill and a weight machine in your office, you might be a little more likely to actually use them because they're right there. If you have to get in your car and drive out in a snowstorm to a gym, probably not going to happen. So Evernote gives you the tools right there that are so easy to use that it makes it more likely that you're going to build and use those good habits.
We have a lot of cases of genealogists who've been doing research for years and years, and they already have lots of files on their computer. How can they transition over to using Evernote? Do they need to take everything that's on their computer and put it into Evernote? What kind of strategy should they use?
I have that problem too, and I sympathize. I have tons of computer files, and then I also have 2 huge black file cabinets of paper, like plain old paper. And again, I apparently went through a pink ink phase. I have a lot of stuff that was written in pink ink. It's so embarrassing, like hot pink. So what I'm doing, you could sit down and try and do it all. I've actually had a couple of New Year's resolutions to do that, and I've never gotten anywhere. It's just too overwhelming, and you get bored, and then you start doing new stuff instead and ordering some death certificates because that's more fun. And it just, for me, it doesn't happen. So my new strategy is old stuff can stay in the file cabinet. As I work on stuff, I incorporate it. So right now, for example, because I'm working with this guy who I'm related to his mother-in-law, I'm working on my Holthusen line, which I haven't touched for a long time. So as we're working together, each document that I touch from my old paper file, in conjunction with this project, I quick scan it in. As I get new information, I keep all of that in Evernote. I'm actually pretty disciplined about the new stuff. It's the old stuff that requires, constant reminding of myself that no, I can't just look at this document. I have to scan it in and then I look at it on the screen. I actually try not to look at the paper at all. I scan it in and then look at it because that helps me get to where I need to be in terms of getting it in there. So eventually, if I live long enough, this method should allow me to get everything into the computer. I do know there are a lot of people who are doing this genealogy do-over that Thomas McKenty is doing, and I think a lot of people are going through those files and either getting rid of stuff or scanning in stuff as they do it, scanning it in as part of that project. So if you're involved in that genealogy do-over thing, I think that's a great opportunity to maybe choose a line and get one line in there. And that also allows you to get familiar with the tool. If you haven't used Evernote in the past, one thing I would suggest is pick one of your lines where you don't have a ton of documentation or paperwork and get all of those in there, and then fool around with it and see what your workflow is going to look like, because it's going to be a little different for each genealogist, which is fine. And that will allow you to kind of refine your process so that you can apply that to your lines where you do have more documentation.
Kerry, if you had to pick one Evernote trick as your favorite, what would it be?
I think capturing documents via the Evernote camera, that has been huge for me, because in the past I would try, in the olden days, of course, you got a paper photocopy, and then eventually you maybe took it home and scanned it. Now, though, when I go to the library, for years, I used to have a flash drive, and I would capture, say, a bunch of newspaper archives or newspaper obituaries on a flash drive. But the problem for me is there was no good way to get the source citation married to the image on the flash drive. I would try and take notes and say, okay, this image is named 2015-132-423, those weird computer names that you get from when you save things to a flash drive. And I would try and write out the source citation and then put the two together when I got home. But it made this whole pile of work and ended up leaving me with a bunch of things without source citations, is essentially what happened. Now I can have that newspaper obituary right on my screen. I can pull out my phone and take a picture of it and type in the source citation right there underneath the image. So they are instantly together, never to be parted, and I don't have to touch it again until I'm actually working with the document. And even then, I maybe have to check my punctuation, and that's about it. So it allows me to be much faster at capturing information. And in my case, I have 2 little kids who are too young to be staying home. So when I get, say, a newspaper roll from Interlibrary Loan, I have to go downtown and get as much work as I possibly can done before the bus is going to come and deposit my kids. So I don't have time to fool around with complicated source citation strategies. I need to capture the information as quick as possible. And this has allowed me to do that. So I think capturing documents and then making them indexed as well. When I'm taking that picture of that newspaper obit, as I'm typing in the source citation, the OCR thing is doing its work. So that thing is indexed on top of it. So there's no question that I'll be able to find it under any word that's in that obituary. It's speeded things up for me so much that I'm getting much more work done, and my work is more useful because it all has the right source citations in it.
Well, that sounds pretty good. When I am out researching, I have the same restrictions time-wise. People have different approaches when they're on site. Some people sit there and they're extraordinarily thorough and they try to do everything right there. And I'm just like capture as much information as possible and then sort it all
Right.
out when I get home.
Right. I've been known
Yeah.
to like sneak almonds for a snack in the stacks so the librarian can't see me, and then get right back to my microfilm reader because I have really limited time
Right.
to research. So it's kind of guerrilla techniques out there.
Well, Kerry, let's switch gears a little bit because I think that people in the audience would probably be very interested in hearing a little bit about what you went through writing the book. So let's talk about that a little bit. When you first thought about writing a book about Evernote, how did you gather your thoughts about what you wanted to include in the book and how you would organize it?
Well, no surprise, I used Evernote for that. What I did at first is tried to get a clear picture of who my reader would be and what their challenges would be. Because I've been doing research for a long time, certainly I'm not perfect at anything, but I have some sort of systems that work for me. And as I said, I'm kind of hyper organized. So for people who are normal, they don't necessarily have that the same organizational structures that I have. So I tried to really put myself in the shoes of who would buy this book and what would make it as useful as possible for them. And I sort of wrote notes as they came to me, and Evernote's great for that because I always have it in my pocket in my phone. Sometimes inspiration would strike while I was walking through Target or whatever, and I'd be able to capture that right away. So the first 4 weeks, I just tried to think about what that person's challenges would be and how to resolve them. I also did, just as luck would have it, I was invited to speak at the Albuquerque Genealogical Society about Evernote. And that crowd and the questions they asked ended up being incredibly helpful because they served as sort of a surrogate reader. The types of questions that they asked helped me really refine what I was aiming to do and who the reader would be and what kinds of questions they would have. So that ended up being very helpful. And if you're looking at doing something like this, I definitely recommend giving a little talk to a group of people who might be readers of your book, because it helped me think of it in ways that I hadn't, even with a lot of effort. From there, I just tried to lay out kind of what your evolution would be. You would start out just trying to set up an account, and then you would try to do basic things, and then you would try to really apply this to your genealogical life. So as you go through the book, you can kind of tell it starts out telling you how to do basic stuff, but then it moves more into how to be a genealogist while incorporating this into it. There are a lot of books about Evernote out there, a lot of books, and some really good ones actually, but there aren't really any that speak to the unique needs of a genealogist. And so I wanted to make sure there was a lot of stuff in here that focused on the types of challenges, the types of documents that we work with, so that people could really see how they would apply this in their daily life.
Did you start from the beginning and write straight through to the end, or did you skip around with different chapters?
I started out writing in the beginning, and I assumed, because everything else I've ever written, I've done it that way, I assumed that I would stick to that. But it turned out that some chapters are much bigger than others, and it's hard to do a big chapter all in one swoop. So I actually ended up outlining some chapters and then skipping to a shorter one. I also found that as I went along, I got inspired about different things. When I was writing about the chapter on kind of how to use this as a genealogist, a lot of security stuff came up. And so I stopped and wrote the chapter on keeping things secure and safe and so forth. So I intended to be linear, but I found as I actually went through the process that didn't work for me. So I changed it.
How long did it take you to write the book?
I started in early February, and it was done on Mother's Day. So what is that, about 4 months? March, April, May. No, 3 months. Some days were more intense than others. Certainly, obviously, like most people, it's more intense at the end. My kids had a lot of Subway a lot of delivery pizza. They loved it. They weren't sure what was going on, but they thought it was pretty cool. But about 3 months total.
Did you give yourself a deadline? Like, did you say to yourself, I want to write this in 3 months? Or, how did that work? What is the realistic thing? What actually happens compared to like what you think you're going to do?
I think that the publisher gives you a deadline, so that helps. And actually, I think that helped a lot because being accountable to somebody else, you have to get it done. You signed a contract. So, and they were very good about sending emails saying, is this done? Is this done? Is this done? So I think that accountability certainly helped. I had planned to space it out a little more than I did. I said, I'm going to write 1,000 words a day. And I had this spreadsheet. If I write like 1,200 words a day, it'll be done on this date. But as I said, I have little kids. They get sick. School's closed. I had a lot of computer issues during this time, actually, and ended up buying a new computer. So you have to plan for the unexpected. Because I'm so organized, I think I can organize my way out of things. Don't do that. It was kind of stressful at the end. I think take the amount of time that you think you need and then add about 60% and more if it's winter and you live in a place where they close every time it snows 1/4 of an inch, which is another thing I learned during this process. So definitely work your plan, but plan for the unexpected as well.
How did you find your voice with this book? It's really clear that some of your personality has slipped in, and I was so happy to see that, actually. And it was actually really interesting. Not only did you find your voice, but you measured your voice as well. So we don't get the full Kerry, but Kerry is definitely there. Talk about the decisions you had to make around that.
That's a relief to hear, actually, because I started out and this is kind of the story of my writing life, I always start out thinking I'm going to sound neutral and professional. You know, that anchor man voice that you think you're going to have with no accent and no personal thing. I started out with that intention because I didn't think that people wanted blog Kerry. They wanted a book to tell them how to use this tool. It always somehow slips in. I'm not sure what this says about me, but it always gets in there somehow. And I also realized as I looked at similar books, boy, it's kind of boring to sit down and read a how-to book. And I think I found that I liked it better when I read books that had a little bit of personality in them. I think, too, because genealogy is such a small community, we all kind of know each other. And even if we haven't met, when you meet a new genealogist, you're sort of instantly friends. So I think as I got more into it and was better able to picture my reader, I felt like the reader would get some of the things that I was saying when I'm talking about the spoon or the time I had to run to the bathroom and write down on a piece of toilet paper something my mother-in-law said, because she never talks about genealogy and she let one thing slip and I wanted to capture it. Normal people don't necessarily get that, but I know genealogists do. So I wanted to put a little bit of that in there just because I knew that they'd get it, and I want readers to understand I am a working genealogist. I work on genealogy every day, so I'm not telling you to use this project because I want to sell books. It's because I really, as a genealogist, think this will be helpful for you. So I kind of wanted to let readers know that I got it. I get some of the challenges because I have the same challenges that they do, and to make them feel like they aren't alone in the organizational challenges and in the analytical challenges that they have as genealogists, and that I get those. I've experienced those myself, and I really do think this tool can help with that.
Well, I was really happy to see a little bit of you slip into the book, and I think it makes it much easier to read. It's very approachable, and it's a very comfortable read. Like, as you say, how-to books can be kind of boring. And I think this kind of really makes it a lot less boring, and you bring the reader along because of that. So I was really happy about that decision.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to hear that, because part of it is I want people to sit and read the book. I don't want them to get bored and wander off, because I'm almost to the point of being obnoxiously evangelical in that I really do think if people apply these tools and techniques, that they're going to be better at genealogy, and their life's going to be easier, so they'll have more time for genealogy. So anything to keep them reading so that they get it.
And for those of you who know Kerry either from Facebook or from her Clue Wagon blog, you'll get a real kick out of this aspect of the book. All right, so last question, biggest question here, toughest question. What was your biggest fear in writing the book, and how did you overcome it?
I think, I've never written a book before, and I never, even when I said yes and agreed to this, I wasn't 100% sure I could do it. In fact, you and I are Facebook friends, and I'm Facebook friends with probably a lot of your listeners. I didn't mention it too much on Facebook because I really wasn't sure that this was a thing I could do. I've never done anything this big before. So part of it was just, can I even finish this? Do I have enough to say that people will actually want to hear? Once I finished, you have to turn something in. So I did. I turned it in, and thankfully I had wonderful editors who helped make it into the book that it is. But it's also not long after you finish it, it actually goes out into the world to be judged. And genealogy, genealogists don't usually hold back. If they have something critical to say, you'll probably hear it. So it was a little bit nerve-wracking seeing it go out into the world and hoping that I had hit the mark, because I really wanted to write something that would be useful to the greatest number of people. I didn't want to write just for beginners or just for experts. I wanted to have something for everyone. But that's a tough thing to do. To please a large number of people is hard. And so I was very nervous about things like reviews and just seeing whether people liked it and whether people felt like they got their money's worth out of it, because it's not free. You have to pay for it. And I wanted people to feel like that was money well spent. Most of us are not wealthy, and I don't want people to waste their money on something they feel isn't useful to them. So I had a lot of fear around, would people find it as useful as I had intended? And fortunately, the reviews have been pretty good, and the feedback's been good. So it was largely unfounded, but it's a very nerve-wracking experience to kind of send it out into the world.
Kerry, where can people find your book?
They can find it on shopfamilytree.com. And there are usually coupons, especially if you sign up for their mailing list. You can also find it on Amazon.com, and it's almost always discounted off of the cover price there. So those are the two best places to buy it. My understanding is that you can also find it at places like Barnes & Noble. My local Barnes & Noble doesn't have it, but it's really tiny. But it's also full price there. So to be honest, we're all genealogists on a budget. I would buy it online.
All right, so just to remind everyone, the book is called How to Use Evernote for Genealogy, a step-by-step guide to organize your research and boost your genealogy productivity by Kerry Scott. Kerry, where can people follow you on the internet if they're intrigued after listening to this discussion? Where can they find you?
I am obnoxiously easy to find. I have a occasionally updated blog called cluewagon.com, and from there you can find links to my Facebook, my Twitter, my Instagram, although it's really boring, and those are actually the big ones, and LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn as well under Kerry Scott. You can't miss me.
Okay, so it's Clue, as in CLUE, wagon.com.
Right.
And you also have a page on the website. So if somebody wanted to see reviews about the book, there's a page about the book that links to a number of reviews that different people in the community have done.
Yes.
Great. Well, Kerry Scott, thank you so much for being on the Genealogy Professional podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
I hope you enjoyed that interview with Kerry Scott as much as I did. It's a little bit different from what we've usually done around here in the past, but things there are changing. We hope to shake things up a bit more around here going forward. We're going to try some new things, but don't worry, we'll continue to bring you the genealogist interviews that you love. And notice that I said we. I have help now. Genealogist Pam Wollos has joined the TGP team. Her goal and mine is to start getting the podcast out on a regular schedule. That should be fully in place by May of this year. There are a few news items. First off, the deadline for speaker submissions to the 2017 National Genealogical Society Conference is coming up on April 1st 2016, so visit ngsgenealogy.org for more information. In TGP news, in the last episode, I mentioned that registration was open for the mastermind groups that I'm offering. Want to let you know that both groups have sold out, so unfortunately it's too late to sign up for them. However, I will be offering 2 specialized masterminds, one for bloggers and one for public speakers. These will be shorter, not the full 12-month masterminds like the others. I'll also be bringing back my popular Goals Workshop. That's a one-time 3-hour workshop that helps you really focus in on your priorities and accomplishing your goals. So keep your eye on the website later in March for information about all of that. We also have a new mailing list and private Facebook group. The group is free, and it's a place where you can talk about the action items from the show and ask questions and whatever else. There's one hitch, though. In order to get into the group, you have to sign up for the mailing list on the genealogyprofessional.com website. Once you sign up, you'll be sent a link for the Facebook group, so be sure to check that out. I'll be traveling and appearing at some conferences in the coming months. On March 10th, I'll be presenting the marketing segment at the Forensic Genealogy Institute in San Antonio, Texas. If you're going to be there, be sure to stop me and say hello. On March 19th, I'll be presenting my Goals Workshop to the members of the New England chapter of the Association of Professional Genealogists. And on April 16th, I'll be presenting a genealogy talk at the Massachusetts Genealogical Council Seminar in Marlborough, Massachusetts. If you're in New England, be sure to check that one out because CC Moore will be presenting a full day of DNA classes as part of the MGC seminar. Don't think that I am letting you away without an action item. This is a really simple and obvious action item for this episode. We talked to Kerry Scott about Evernote. Evernote is a free tool. Your action item this week is to check it out. Download it on your phone or computer and see what it can do for you. It's free, so trying it out doesn't cost you anything but time. But of course, I would suggest you check out Kerry's book on Evernote as well. It's really good. Until next time, so long. The Genealogy Professional Podcast is a production of Fieldstone Common Media, copyright 2016. Executive producer, Marianne Pierre-Louis. Creative producer, George Edwards. Production assistant, Pam Wolos. Technical director, Jean-Luc Pierre-Louis Jr.